Hey guys, this is Candle, and welcome to my Nintendo games, part 1. And I say part 1 because I have enough that I'm doing this in 2 parts for the consoles. I'm actually going to have a separate video for the handhelds as well. So I guess you could say it's 3 parts. But anyways, for the consoles, we're doing the NES, the N64, and the Super Nintendo and the GameCube. So pretty much the last times Nintendo was actually competing for power in terms of their hardware. So first up is the NES. This is one of my most recent acquisitions, and in terms of hardware systems, excuse me, one of my most recent acquisitions in terms of hardware systems, and so it's also probably one of my smallest collections as well. I actually only have 6 games, one of which is, or 2 of which are duplicates of each other. So start things off with just the cartridge, the ones I have just cartridges. I have Galaga. Now, Galaga is one of my all-time favorite arcade games. If I'm ever able to start collecting arcade cabinets, this is definitely one I'm going to get. This is a pretty faithful adaptation or port of the actual original arcade game. And I remember picking this up because I thought, based on the color here, that it was supposed to be like a different color than all the rest. And then you look at the back and it's just that normal gray. So I think this just ended up getting like sun yellowed or something. So I don't know. But then I also have the original Dragon Warrior, known as Dragon Quest in Japan. And I haven't actually played this one yet. I'm probably going to wait a little bit before I dive into these, because this is a pretty lengthy, grind-heavy RPG. And then, of course, I love Final Fantasy. I really, really do. It's one of my all-time favorite franchises, so of course I had to get the game as well. You know, this was the one I got with my NES. And going to the boxed games, these are all complete in box. Again, I only have 3 of them. But again, loving Final Fantasy as much as I do, I eventually had to get the box copy of Final Fantasy. If you're wondering why this is shiny, it's because my classic box games like this that come in cardboard, I keep in these plastic protecting cases. And they lock in, so it's like you can kind of... There we go. This one wasn't actually that hard to pull out. There we go. Got the whole thing right here. It's still a bit shiny because it's nice and glossy, but here's the actual protecting case. So it's still nice to have that. Now, the next 2 games I just kind of picked up on a whim, and because they were in the box and they weren't that expensive. And then I come home and open them up and realize, oh, they are actually complete in box. So we have another arcade classic. It says super arcade hit. We got Joust here. So that's a classic arcade game, Joust. I don't know. I've never played too much Joust when I was younger, but still fun to have. And of course, the classic Ninja Gaiden. Now, something I forgot to grab real quick is I do also have the NES Classic Edition, which is an excellent way to play classic NES games. The unfortunate thing is that there are 30 games on here and only 30. Unless you hack this thing and modify it, you can only play those 30 games. But it's still good to have because you can play them in 720p HD, and they're pretty good. I mean, you've got Balloon Fight, you've got Bubble Bobble, Castlevania, Castlevania 2, Donkey Kong Jr., Dragon Quest 2, or sorry, Double Dragon 2, Dr. Mario, Excite Bike, Final Fantasy, which I already have, Galaga I already have, Ghosts and Goblins, Gradius, Ice Climber, Kid Icarus, Kirby's Adventure, Mario Brothers, which is the classic arcade game, not Super Mario Brothers, Mega Man 2, Metroid, Ninja Gaiden, which I already have, Pac-Man, Punch-Out featuring Mr. Dream, not Mike Tyson because of licensing issues, Star Tropics, Super C, and of course Super Mario Brothers 1, 2, and 3, Tecmo Bowl, and Zelda 1 and 2. So it's good to have that as well. But that's it for NES. I know it's kind of short. Moving on to Super Nintendo, I do have a few of these in boxes as well, and I also have some just the cartridges. So we'll do the cartridges first. I do have Breath of Fire, and I plan on doing a Let's Play of this at some point. One of these days, I got to get Breath of Fire 2 as well. Classic Squaresoft RPG. Again, same people that made Final Fantasy. So really, really interesting as well. Basically, you play as a guy who's like the blood of dragons or something. I never got far enough into it, but I think you can actually transform into a dragon at some point as well. And of course, I have the cartridge for Final Fantasy 2. One of these days I have to get this complete in box, but those can be a bit expensive. Now, this is technically not Final Fantasy 2. This is Final Fantasy 4, and more specifically, this is Final Fantasy 4 Easy Type, because Japan, likes to be douchebags. And Final Fantasy 2 and 3 originally for the Famicom were coming out too late in the lifespan of the NES, so they canned them. They got as far as making a prototype of Final Fantasy 2 on the NES, and then canned the project. And so Final Fantasy 4 came out in North America as Final Fantasy 2, except this is a dumbed down version of it because Japan thought that the Western audience was too dumb to understand complicated JRPGs. They were too difficult for Western audiences. So unfortunately, we ended up getting a dumbed down version, which was released in Japan as Final Fantasy IV Easy Type. And of course, I also have Super Mario World. You can see my Super NES Superset right up top there. This was supposed to come with that. Unfortunately, I didn't pay attention when I bought the damn thing, even though it came in the original box. Like, it's got the serial number on the back for the system inside it and everything. And it was missing some of the things that were supposed to be in there. It had the control deck, a controller, the power brick, and an RF adapter, and the AV cable, but it was missing the Super Mario World pack-in it was supposed to have, and it was also missing the second game pack it was supposed to have, Super Mario Kart, as well as a second controller. So I had to buy all those separately, unfortunately. But then there's also one of my all-time favorite Super Mario games ever. Played this so much as a kid over at my cousin's house when I was really little. Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. Unfortunately, Squaresoft and Nintendo kind of had a falling out shortly after this, and Squaresoft owns the rights to some of the characters in this, which is why we haven't ever seen them again, unfortunately. Maybe eventually. I mean, they seem to have patched things up. Final Fantasy VII is finally coming to a Nintendo platform, so hopefully they've patched things up enough that we can maybe see Super Mario RPG 2 eventually. I don't know. But then, of course, I also have the spiritual successor to Secret of Mana, Secret of Evermore. Same engine, same battle system, completely different story, though. Instead of being fantasy, it's all about science fiction. I have never gotten that far into this. But that's it for my Super Nintendo cartridges. Now is on to my box copies, and these are all complete in box or nearly complete in box. So I have, of course, Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past. I played this so much as a kid. Fun fact, I got my start with a lot of Nintendo games through emulation because I didn't have Nintendo consoles growing up. My only opportunity to play them was when we got to visit my aunt and uncle in Chicago, which is a 7-hour drive from where I am and from where I grew up. And so I didn't get to play Nintendo games too often. But still excellent game. Unfortunately, you can see the box is a little bit damaged. There's some tape here, but still in pretty good condition. I think that one's complete in box. This one, I think I have everything except for the cardboard insert that's supposed to be on here, so the box is a little crushed and weather-worn. But it's Illusion of Gaia. Now, this is the second part in a loose trilogy of games that unfortunately did not make it to American shores. Made it to Europe for some reason, so it's available in English, but not to American shores. So I need to get a reproduction cart at some point. But the first game was Soul Blazer, then we have Illusion of Gaia, or Illusion of Time in Europe, and then was Terra Enigma. Excuse me. So next up is the Final Fantasy game that we got in place of Final Fantasy V, because again, Japan thought that Western audience was too stupid and didn't like hard games, so we got basically Final Fantasy for babies. Now, I still really enjoy this game, and it's got some really catchy music, but it is Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. Not to be confused with Mystic Quest released in Europe. That's actually one of the Game Boy Color or Game Boy games that aren't really even Final Fantasy games. But this is, I believe, known as Final Fantasy US or USA in Europe and Japan and stuff like that, or Mystic Quest Legend or something like that somewhere. I don't remember. But still, I really enjoyed that. That's complete in box as well, as is this, Final Fantasy III. This is my all-time favorite Final Fantasy game. Now, remember, Final Fantasy II is actually Final Fantasy IV. So Final Fantasy III on the Super Nintendo is actually Final Fantasy VI. And it was after this that they kind of sorted the numbers out, and then we finally started getting the proper numbers. So this is my all-time favorite Final Fantasy game. I have never actually beaten this. One of these days I really need to. And then, of course, the last Super Nintendo game is one that is very near and dear to my heart. It's one of my all-time favorite games of all time. I know I just repeated myself a little bit. But it's still worth quite a bit of money too. And this is complete in box, near mint condition. It is Chrono Trigger. Oh, awesome, awesome classic RPG. I really got to do a Let's Play of this sometime soon. I really, really need to. I tried starting one not too long ago on the Steam version, and there's just some things about that I don't really like. I guess you could say I really am a bit of a purist when it comes to this. Later versions, like from the DS onwards, have a little bit better translation, but this one I think is still the best version available. Sorry. Anyways, that is it for Super Nintendo, which leads me into N64, which again is not really as large a collection as I want it to be. I really need to grow this one. And I don't have any boxed games for this. I used to have one, but I got rid of it for some reason. I don't remember why. But we've got Banjo-Kazooie, and this apparently belonged to some girl named Kara at some point. But we have Banjo-Kazooie. I never really got into this too much. The main reason I picked this up is because it's from the same people that made this, one of my all-time favorite N64 games, Donkey Kong 64. I really, really love this game. I don't think I've ever actually beaten it myself, but I have seen a Let's Play of it, so I know how it ends. Still really, really fun. This is one of the only games that actually requires the N64 expansion pack. In fact, this game came with the expansion pack in the box, so a lot of people got theirs that way through this. And then there was also a special jungle green N64 and controller that went with this in a bundle as well that they sold, as well as like a controller sleeve too. And it's really, really weird, but a lot of fun, that game. And of course, what multiplayer game is there to play on the N64 other than GoldenEye? Yes, 007 GoldenEye. Awesome, awesome, awesome game. That's all I have to say about that. Anyways, next up is Harvest Moon 64. Unfortunately, I don't have Harvest Moon for the Super Nintendo. It is really, really expensive game. We're talking like $200 for just the cartridge. Complete in box, it's like $400. So that's kind of like my holy grail. However, this is still a really good one as well. And this one's a bit rare too. I think it's like $60 for the cartridge, I think, nowadays. And then like $100 complete in box. But I think I picked this up for like $20 or something like that. And you can see I label my cartridges as well, so you can see what they are on when they're on the shelf. Yeah, love this game. And of course, I have Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, probably the worst version to play. It's much better to play it on the 3DS. Much better game to play it. Even if you don't want the 3D aspect, you can play it on a 2DS, no problem. And it'll still run great and look great. But still pretty good. Fuck the Water Temple, by the way. And then the last N64 game I have is Yoshi's Story. I remember trying to emulate this one when I was a kid, and it always struggled. I don't know if it was because my computer just wasn't powerful enough at the time, which is really odd considering I was running decent graphics cards for the era. But yeah, it's basically Yoshi's second game. This was the one the Yoshi second centric game they came out with after Yoshi's Island on the Super Nintendo. So yeah, unfortunately, I am missing some of the more high-profile N64 games like Super Mario 64, Majora's Mask, Mario Kart 64, which I used to have. I don't know why I got rid of that. I think because I decided at the time I didn't really need all of the Mario Kart games. I'm really wishing I had changed my tune, because I used to have Double Dash as well, and I don't now. But speaking of Double Dash, I think it's time to move on to the GameCube games. So start that off with the very first GameCube game I ever owned, though unfortunately not this copy. I traded in a lot of my games when I was younger. Really stupid of me, because there are a lot of great games that I wish I still had. Anyways, I have Luigi's Mansion. Great. It's basically Nintendo does survival horror, and it's not very scary or spooky, but it is a little bit creepy at times, and it's still quite a bit of fun. I have not played the remake on the 3DS yet, but I am looking forward to Luigi's Mansion 3 on the Switch, which is supposed to be coming sometime this year, so I am looking forward to that. Anyways, let's see, where is it? So some of the next games I got for the GameCube was Pikmin, and I eventually, if I don't drop it, I eventually grabbed Pikmin 2 as well. Personally, I like Pikmin better, which is odd because I don't like time limits in games, and the time limits in Pikmin 1 are a lot more strict than they are in Pikmin 2, especially since you have to beat the game within 30 in-game days in Pikmin 1, but Pikmin 2 has no such restrictions, so it's really odd. I don't know why I like Pikmin 1 better, because a lot of people prefer Pikmin 2. But either way, I also have Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. So after Super Mario RPG, they started another Mario RPG, which eventually became Paper Mario on the N64, and I unfortunately have not yet played that one. But that was followed up with a sequel called Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. And it really is an awesome game. Really great, awesome game. I think this is the best Paper Mario game I've ever played. Granted, there are a few I haven't played yet. Like I said, I haven't played the original. I haven't played Sticker Star on the 3DS, which apparently everybody hates. And I haven't played Color Splash either, despite owning it. So I really need to get to that. I also have Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. This is the only Zelda game I own on the GameCube now. I used to have Four Swords Adventures, complete in the cardboard box with the link cable and everything. And honestly, I really enjoyed it. I also really enjoyed Wind Waker as well. Beautiful, beautiful game. I was never one of the people who hated the art style. I always thought it was very charming and looks very well on CRT or even on a regular modern TV as well. And unfortunately, I borrowed this copy from a friend years ago and never gave it back, and then we lost touch. So, Curtis, I'm sorry. I still have your copy, but it's mine now. So again, of course, like with Harvest Moon 64 on the N64, I eventually had to get the one on the GameCube. Harvest Moon, A Wonderful Life. Now, this is different from other Harvest Moon games because usually Harvest Moon games, you go through 2 to 3 years of 4 30-day seasons, and that's how the game goes, farming sim. This one, you still have 4 seasons a year, but the seasons are only 10 days long, and the game lasts 10 years, and time doesn't pause while you're in buildings like other games. So that kind of put me off for it. But it was always a really interesting game to me because the whole idea of this was you would start out with your character fairly young, and then you would skip years. So you would end up seeing the entire progression of their life into the next generation and everything, finishing out your final year when your character is elderly and ready to pass the farm on to like their grandkid or whatever, which is really, really neat. Unfortunately, I've never actually beaten this game. So next up is, from what I've heard, a fairly rare GameCube game, and it's the only one of its franchise I've actually beaten. Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. Apparently this is rare enough that it costs like $90 or something, like $90 to $100 nowadays. I think I picked it up for like 30, I think. I don't remember. But this is the only Fire Emblem game I've actually beaten. So this is a turn-based strategy game. Very, very fun as well. And of course, me being a Final Fantasy buff, I eventually had to get Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. Unfortunately, it's not complete. I don't have the manual or anything. And in fact, this copy at one point, I picked this up at a GameStop, I think. But at one point, this originally came from a Blockbuster, believe it or not. So that's really fun. You can still see the sticker on here. I haven't been able to get rid of it, unfortunately. This was a really weird game because it was local multiplayer only. But it was really weird because it was also expensive, because not only did you need a GameCube and a copy of the game, but you needed 4 Game Boy Advances or Game Boy Advance SPs and 4 GameCube to Game Boy Advance link cables so that everybody could play, because the Game Boy Advance acted as a second screen, much like you saw with the DS and the Wii U, where that was your inventory system for your own character. So it is playable single player, and you don't need the Game Boy Advance and the link cable in order to play it single player, but it's not as fun. This was definitely meant to be played for multiplayer, so I'm definitely looking forward for the remaster that's supposed to be coming out sometime soon. Next up is a game I really don't know too much about. I ended up grabbing this off of a friend for like $35 and in with like a few other games as well. And it's Conflict Desert Storm. I don't really know too much about this one. I don't think I've ever really played it. So moving on. Next up is a game I wish I could play. Unfortunately, my copy, the disc is, I don't know if you can see it on here, but the disc is like super scratched all to hell. and unfortunately, there's no data damage. It doesn't look like no top layer damage, so that's good. But I'd have to get this buffed out. So I haven't actually been able to play it. It freezes like constantly. But it's from the same people that did Sonic the Hedgehog. This is Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. This was supposed to be a really fun, like weird puzzle platformer game, and I haven't ever been able to really play it, unfortunately. But next up is an RPG that if you like Chrono Trigger, if you like card-based battle systems, then this is the game for you. Baton Kaitos, Eternal Wings and the Lost Ocean. Really, really wonderful game. Really beautiful game, too. I don't know if you can see the screenshots on the back here, how focused they are, but it's really, really visually stunning. I don't really know what else to say about this. I got to play this game again one day. I did beat that one, though. So next up, may as well talk about this. The Game Boy Player startup disc. Yes, I do have a Game Boy Player. For the longest time, it was the only way I could play Game Boy and Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance games on the TV. Nowadays, I have a Retron 5 so that does all that in HD with nice sharp clarity. And the Game Boy Players themselves are actually fairly common to find, but the discs are actually kind of hard to find. And this is the one I usually keep my memory card in. If I pack my GameCube away, it would go right up here. Oh, excuse me. Unfortunately, the disc is mandatory if you're going to use a Game Boy Player. The disc is mandatory. There are bootleg stuff you could do nowadays, but the disc is the official way to do it. All right. Next up is another game that I got. Actually, another two games that I got from that friend for like $35 all told. X-Men Legends. Don't really know too much about it. I haven't actually played it yet. And Zoid's Battle Legends. Again, don't really know too much about it. I haven't played it yet. And may as well finish off that section of the games I got from a friend. This was the one I really wanted from him. And it's Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. This is the GameCube port, obviously. Unfortunately, it's just a port. I had always hoped that it was a remake, like the original GameCube, or like the GameCube version of the original Resident Evil. But no, they just, for 2 and 3, they just ported them over, unfortunately. But speaking of that Resident Evil, I have it here. This is the same version they later used for the HD remaster. So this is, and it's a 2-disc game too. I think Jill is on one disc and Chris is on the other. I don't know which disc is which, but still, really, really good remake. This is probably the best way to play this game, short of playing the HD versions available on modern systems. Anyways, next up... Oh, no. Yeah. All right. Next up is Beautiful Joe. Really, really awesome game from Capcom. Looks like a comic book, basically. A lot of fun, but it's also quite difficult. And then Turok Evolution. I've never actually played this. I don't even remember where or when I got it. I just know that I have it. So, yeah. I don't even have a manual for this, unfortunately, but it is the original GameCube case, so that's always nice. So speaking of GameCube RPGs that like Bit and Kaitos, you can't talk about GameCube RPGs without talking about Tales of Symphonia, which is excellent, beautiful game. One of these days I have to do a Let's Play of this. It's also the only Tales game I've actually beaten. I love Tales games, but I've never actually beaten any of them other than this one. So we also have, if I can not drop it all over the place. I also have Super Monkey Ball 1 and Super Monkey Ball 2. These are fun games. Basically, you're a little monkey who rolls around on a ball, and you're not actually manually rolling the ball around. You're tilting the stage around almost like it's gyroscopic. I don't know why they haven't put this on the Switch yet, or maybe they have and I just didn't notice. But yeah, you're tilting the stage around and it rolls the ball, so it's a little bit hard to control that way, but still quite a bit of fun. And I only have a couple more GameCube games, including, of course, the Mario platformer of the time, Super Mario Sunshine. I don't really like this game. I don't think it controls very well. It's not very fun, but I still have it anyways. And of course, one of the best Star Wars games I have ever played, especially on the GameCube. Star Wars Rogue Leader Rogue Squadron 2. Awesome game. One of these days I have to get Rebel Strike, which is Rogue Squadron 3. But anyways, that is it for my GameCube games. So that's it. Ooh. I talked about the NES Classic earlier. We'll tack this onto the Super Nintendo because I have a Super Nintendo Classic as well. And again, just like the NES Classic, excellent way to play some classic, awesome games from this system. Unfortunately, it is locked to only 22 games, I think. Is it saying on here somewhere? I think it's 22 games. It is also the only official way to get Star Fox 2. Star Fox 2 was canceled like 99% of the way through its development because it was coming out, it would have been coming out too soon to the N64, and Miyamoto wanted a larger difference in between what the Super Nintendo was capable of with polygonal graphics and what the N64 was capable of with polygonal graphics. But still, quite a lot of really awesome games in here. You've got Contra 3, The Alien Wars, Donkey Kong Country, Earthbound, Final Fantasy 3, which I already have, F-Zero, which I used to have in box. I actually picked that up. It was a brand new copy for like 20 bucks. I got that like 8 years ago, and then for some reason I got rid of it at some point. I don't remember why. Kirby's Dream Course, Kirby Superstar, Mega Man X, Secret of Mana, which is really awesome because those games can be pretty hard to, or Secret of Mana can be pretty expensive to try to find. It's usually like 70 to 100 bucks just for the cartridge nowadays, I think. And the PS4 version and Steam version are not quite the same. But they also got Star Fox 2, of course, Street Fighter 2 Turbo Hyper Fighting, Super Castlevania 4, Super Ghouls and Ghosts, Super Mario Kart, Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, Super Mario World, Super Metroid, Super Punch-Out. A lot of games that started with Super on the Super Nintendo. I wonder why. And of course, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past and Yoshi's Island, which in Japan was Super Mario World 2. So, anyways, that is it for Nintendo Part 1. I'll see you guys next time with the Nintendo Part 2. So until then, thanks you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Please remember to comment, rate, and subscribe.